Excerpt from the diary of the Honourable Lady Mahon, compiled in 1956 when she was 78.
As I, Edith, was born in 1878 and Ethel in 1880, we cannot be thought to have any very sensible recollection before 1884, when I was 6 and she was 4. Children do not take much account of time, so any actual dates mentioned come from the diary of our mother, Augusta Caroline Dillon, as she was then. Kathleen, and still in 1956, called Moppy. That name I shall use here. She and I were afterthoughts in the family. There were 11 and 9 years, respectively, between Georgie, our eldest sister, and Robin, our brother. As children, we looked on them as belonging to our parents' generation. We all lived with Grandpapa, Robert, 3rd Lord Clonbrock, and the aunts. We had altogether 8 aunts, but one, Alice Congreve, had died before I can remember, and 2, Mimi Deltry and Lily Ellis Nanny, had married before I was born. The aunts to us meant the 5 unmarried ones living at Clonbrock in our day. Grandpa was very kind to us and very fond of us. Now that he was old and shut off from most of his former activities, he probably had more time to be amused by small children than he had in the case of his own daughters. I'm sure he had considered our little pleasures more than he ever did theirs. Of course, we did not see very much of him. He always sat in what was then known as his room, near the dining room, and we were upstairs in the nursery at the furthest end of the top passage. We saw him at prayers in the morning, at luncheon, when we were old enough to go down to it, and we were taken to his room to say good night every evening when the dressing gong rang at 7:15 p.m., half an hour before dinner. Then we sat, one on each of his knees, and he gave us little round chocolates. As long as he could see, he read prayers in the morning in the dining room at 9:15, sitting at the breakfast table with his back to the middle window. All the family attended, each sitting in the same place every day. Aunt Louisa's chair was near the door, as she nearly always came in late, usually with a handful of rings, brooches and earrings, which she surreptitiously put on when everyone knelt down. A long wooden form was put for all the servants, except our nurse, who did not attend, in front of the sideboard, stretching almost the whole length of the room. I can see them all now, filing in strict order. First the housekeeper, then the cook, Miss Dillon and Miss Helen's maid, Mrs. Dillon's maid, any visiting maid, Miss Louisa, Georgie and Katie's maid, the head housemaid, the kitchen maid, the nursery maid, the second housemaid, the scullery maid, the hall boy, the second footman, the first footman, any visiting valet, and Mr. Dillon's valet. The butler then, who held the door open for the procession to enter, shut it and sat down. Prayers began. A short reading from the Bible and some prayers. Grandpapa liked us to sit on each side of him. One day, when Moppy for some reason would not, he told her he felt like a sow with one ear. As soon as prayers were over, he reached down from the right-hand corner of the chimney-piece a plate of fruit that had been saved from the previous night's dessert for us. Mother said many years later that the aunts had sometimes not been too pleased to see the best of dish of 4 strawberries being put on that plate. The family breakfast came up directly after prayers. I must be wrong in remembering the cook, kitchen and scullery maids all at prayers the same day. They must have taken turns, because somehow someone was left to see to the breakfast. While it was coming up, everybody read their letters. Once we were told by the aunt's maids to listen well and see if they could pick up any news of Lord Churchill, the aunt's uncle, who was known to be dying. Luckily for us, Grandpapa read out of the letter, "Poor old Frank is not dead yet." We rushed up to the workroom and reported that, much to the relief of the maids, who now knew they had a little longer to prepare their black dresses. Meals in those days were rather different from now. Of course, even without visitors, there was a fairly large party at Clonbrock, and even so, it seemed to me they must be eating more than we do now. For breakfast, there was porridge, at least 2 hot dishes, boiled eggs, white scones, brown scones, toast, jam, marmalade, tea and coffee, and always on the side table, cold sirloin of beef, a ham and some other cold meat, pressed beef, a cold pie or tongue. In the winter, game pie, cold pheasant, etc. At Christmas, the centrepiece of the sideboard was a glazed boar's head with glass eyes and tusks, holding an orange in his mouth, the whole containing a guillotine. When a pig was killed, the cook made sausages, black pudding, brawn, etc. The hams were cured at home, the rounds of beef, pressed beef and tongue, all pickled by the cook. We loved sausages. When we knew they had been made, we rushed down the passage to meet the nursery maid carrying the nursery breakfast tray up the 80-odd steps from the kitchen, hoping against hope to see the square willow-patterned dish with a little blue lion handle on the cover, which we knew would contain the longed-for sausages. Lunch, or as it was then called, luncheon, at 2 p.m. was at Clonbrock chiefly a ladies' meal. They ate meat and pudding of some sort and cake, and most of them drank beer. The men walked in as they liked, helped themselves usually to cold meat, with which they drank beer or claret, sat at the side table, cut themselves a piece of cake. There was a plum and ginger cake always on the table, drank a glass of masala with it, and walked out. Tea at 5 was not eaten sitting round a table. Everyone sat where they liked in the drawing room, balancing a piece of bread and butter or cake on the edge of their saucers. Dinner at 7:45 was the most important meal of the day. Grace was always said before and after dinner, even when there was no one staying in the house. Dinner consisted every night of soup, fish, or any entree, meat usually a choice of 2, pudding a choice of 2, savoury, cheese and dessert. When there was a party, there was an extra course. Claret or masala was generally drunk up to dessert when port was handed round. The ladies went out when they had finished their dessert. The men stayed on with the port. Sometimes at winter shooting parties, the old horseshoe table was put by the fire before the servants left the room, so that the men could sit round drinking their wine. It was then sometimes nearly 10 before they joined the ladies. After dinner, even when there was no visitors, the family assembled in the drawing room. The butler came to the door and in a pompous voice said, "Dinner's announcements. Please, my lord." Grandpa then gave his arm to my mother, my father to the eldest aunt present, and the rest followed as they liked. The manservants stood in a row in front of the organ, while the family processed into the dining room. When there were visitors, they went in strict order of precedence, headed by Grandpapa with the chief lady visitor, the rear brought up by the chief gentleman visitor who took in Aunt Fanny. When there was a rather grand party, either for shooting or the fair, the footmen wore in the evening, red plush breeches and silk stockings. One butler is reported to have asked Aunt Helen, who really ran the house, if the footman should breach this evening. That must have come to an end when I was very small. I can only just remember once peeping into the hall to see the footman's red breeches. We often later, especially when our cousins Hilda and Charlie Dillon were with us, peeped at the party going into dinner and much admired the ladies' smart dresses with long trains and the buttonholes that Aunt Louisa made for all the men. She made one for her father and brother every night when they wore black ties. When any lady was staying in the house, they put on white ties, unless it was a very intimate friend. Then, with an apology on the first night, they stuck to their dinner jackets and black ties.